or 8 quarterbacks, maybe more, tend to go in the first round. And if you're drafting 12th, you don't have the option to draft Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, etc. So I'm going to go from somewhere in the middle and try to just give a general guide on what I like to do for Superflex leagues. This is applicable as well with my strategy for auction leagues. I'm going to basically go 0 QB in a Superflex, and that's going to be sacrilege to a lot of people out there. I've already gotten some hate comments on previous videos because people think my team sucks. I've done the same strategy for a decade of playing fantasy football. I usually pan out pretty well in these leagues, so I'm going to continue to go with what I do, and if it's something you think can work for you, great. If not, go with your own strategy, by all means. But I'm going to start out probably at the wide receiver position, but I could also go running back here simply because there's only been one taken off the board, and it's not a full PPR league. It is only a half-point PPR league, and a lot of these leagues that I've been drafting, I've got 3 wide receivers in there. This time, there's only 2 wide receiver spots in the lineup, so I am going to go ahead and just go forward with one, and I think Breece Hall, even though I drafted him in the last video I did, he's going to be my running back that I look to go after Christian McCaffrey. I think he is in for an absolutely massive season. I like him even a little better in PPR, but I think half PPR, he's going to be a smash as well. So, obviously, a lot more quarterbacks go off the board with Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Jackson, Stroud, Burrow. That's 6 in the first round. I think in your real leagues, you might even see more than that go. Auction leagues, people tend to really pay up for quarterback. Dak Prescott, the first quarterback off the board in round 2, and we see the others as wide receivers and running backs going off the board. So, kind of taking a look at where we are. The one thing I don't like about going with Breece Hall in round 1 is Garrett Wilson would be a really attractive pick for me at this point in the second round. If I had gone, say, Bijan Robinson at that first pick instead, I would probably be taking Garrett Wilson here. Just something to think about. Normally, I would maybe hope to get Puka Nacua to slide to me at the middle of the second round. Doesn't happen here. We can at least peek at the quarterback position. And look, if you were going to do it, I think Anthony Richardson or Kyler Murray would be fine picks here, especially Anthony Richardson. But as it is, let's go ahead and we're going to go with Marvin Harrison. I'm going to go pivot at the last moment. Is Marvin Harrison going to outscore A.J. Brown this year for fantasy? Maybe not. Maybe not. But there is upside of the Puka Nacua variety, in my opinion, for Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison was consensus just outlandishly good in college, and everybody knew he was going to go to a team and probably contribute right away. Kyler Murray, I think, now that he's healthy, could be a bounce-back candidate to really be a solid option for fantasy, and he's going to have Marvin Harrison helping him out. So, not going to be able to stack the two, obviously, with Kyler going off the board, and we see Brock Purdy as a second-round pick. Quarterbacks are very, very valuable, but I'm going to feel very good about my other positions, and then I'm going to show you, and it may not be exactly applicable to your leagues because I am drafting against CPU here on Sleeper. May there be people in your leagues that decide to draft a QB3 before some of their other starters? Potentially so, but I think you can generally wait on quarterback and still end up with some pretty good floor options. Guys that maybe don't have as much upside as the QBs taken early, but some really quality floors. And I'm going to take Kyren Williams here in the third round. I know I kind of talked through that for a while before taking a look at my options, but Kyren Williams, I think, is going to be a workhorse for the Rams. This is the one guy that I might be willing to handcuff in all of fantasy football. Typically don't do too much of the handcuffing during draft season. That's maybe toward the middle of the season after you've racked up some wins that you can start thinking about handcuffs a little bit more as you prepare for the playoffs. But Kyren Williams has had some little injury concerns in the recent past, and I think Blake Corum was drafted to be a direct replacement if something should happen to Kyren Williams. So later on, I do kind of have in the back of my head that I might like to grab him, Blake Corum, if we get a chance to do so. But for now, we'll kind of take a look back at the board. I mean, there's still some great options here. Devon Achane in the fourth round. You're basically getting a one-round discount on a lot of these elite players. I would love to get Malik Neighbors or Cooper Kupp coming back. Granted, I did take a Ram already. So we're learning. We're learning here some of our preferences that we might have to be aware of and be prepared for. Jaden Daniels would be an interesting quarterback if I were going to do it at some point here before too long. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to draft a third running back and have Devon Achane in my flex. And look, sometimes I like to challenge myself in these mock drafts to do things I'm uncomfortable with so that when I get into a real draft, I can sort of say, hey, I've already seen this, and it ends up maybe working out better than you might expect. I wouldn't have minded having my wide receiver core being the two rookies, Harrison and Malik Neighbors, but Malik Neighbors does not quite drop to us. Cooper Kupp doesn't either, so we're feeling a little bit bummed out about that. Not to mention the fact that Jalen Waddle would be our next pick on the board, and we just drafted a Miami Dolphins. So coming up against a little bit of friction already, but that's not the end of the world. You see the quarterbacks, though, start to kind of die down to where people are not as aggressively selecting them. And this might be the part where I do jump in with Jaden Daniels. If Daniels had been off the board at this point, I probably would be going in a different direction. But my thought process with why I like Jaden Daniels is he is a 1 round cheaper than Caleb Williams. He is a 3 rounds cheaper than Anthony Richardson, with the potential to be Anthony Richardson, the potential to be very similar to Kyler Murray. He's a rushing quarterback. That is very valuable in fantasy. There's not the guaranteed production that it feels like there would be with those other guys, especially Kyler. I don't know that Anthony Richardson is guaranteed because he's also got some health concerns coming off of last year. But I feel very good about Jaden Daniels and the ceiling potential. I drafted him in the 5th round. It's a little bit risky to take a guy in the 5th round that you're not certain is going to be a stud. But I feel like if he pans out the way some of these rushing quarterbacks do, even if he's not great for the real NFL, I feel like Jaden Daniels could be very good for my fantasy team this year. And in a Superflex format, I really like that. So as we continue on here, we look in the next round. Now we feel good about having one quarterback. Had we not gone Jaden Daniels there, had we gone with, say, a Jalen Waddle or a Devontae Smith, we'd have our wide receiver 2 locked up. Zay Flowers, that would have been a fine pick. And then we'd be looking at the likes of Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback 1. I like being able to wait on quarterback, but still have the upside potential with Daniels. We'll take somebody safer for our QB2, and we'll want to lock that in relatively soon since we waited so long to pick the first one. But for this, I'm going to go down the board a little bit, I think, and take Tank Dell, because I don't think Dell would have made it back around to us. And I'm sort of the mindset, as I do more and more of these mock drafts, when it comes to the Houston Texans, I'm going to be happy to take the cheapest of the 3, and the 3 being Nico Collins, who went back here at 4.10, Stephon Diggs, who went here at 5.2. I'm going to get the guy that I think has just as good of a chance as the others to emerge within that offense as a fixture for fantasy, Tank Dell at the 6.6. And is it a little bit lean for my wide receiver 2? Maybe so. But there are other teams in this league that are going to have to be lean at other positions because they didn't draft the elite names that we did at the beginning. And I do feel Breece Hall and Marvin Harrison can be elite names. There's some people out there who play fantasy and say, well, I haven't seen it from Marvin Harrison, so how can I possibly know that he's going to be great? That's fine. Continue to feel that way, and I'll continue to draft rookies and be the one to benefit. I do it every single year, and I feel very good about that as a general principle when it comes to my strategies. Here, I don't really love the quarterbacks anymore at this range, but I think Aaron Rodgers certainly does have the upside to maybe not return to MVP caliber, but to still be a pretty good option. And so because we did wait so long on QB1, we're going to draft our second quarterback here. And other than Team 3, everybody's pretty well locked in with QBs right now. Team 11 still needs one more. And again, you're dealing with computers, so there are things that are going to be a little bit wonky. Could we have waited for a Baker Mayfield, a Will Levis with similar upside? Sure. I think Bryce Young, if I am going to draft a QB3, would be interesting. You could also wait till the very end and double up on Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. This is going to be a strategy that I'm going to advocate toward, because if you want to do that, you might be able to pick them at the very end and then just drop the one that doesn't end up being the starter, and you have another starting quarterback, which can be very valuable in this format. I'm going to go right now. I do have my flex filled with a running back. That's something that I can feel a little bit better about when I'm fretting about my wide receiver depth. I'm going to take a Chief here, and the more I watch highlights from camp, the more Xavier Worthy is the Chief wide receiver I want. Does that make me a sucker? Maybe. But I do think that the connection with Mahomes and the fact that Rashee Rice could be dealing with some legal trouble and obviously the potential for suspension, the fact that Hollywood Brown has been up and down throughout his career, if I'm looking at the 3 Chiefs in this range, this is an example where I do feel a little bit more strongly than I did with the Houston situation about making sure I get the one that I feel like has the best upside, which does happen to be the youngest player in the rookie in this case. I'm not afraid of taking rookies. I'm not afraid of taking year 2 players at the wide receiver position. And I do have Xavier Worthy on my bench week 1 because I have loaded up at the other positions. So I feel very good about that. The one regret I maybe do have is not going with Brock Bowers in that spot. I do need to kind of make a mental note to myself to be a little bit more considerate of Bowers as we move along, because I really do like him, but I continue to not take him in these mocks because I sort of gloss over the tight end position. If I basically stop at this Kincaid level, maybe you include Kittle in that. I don't really tend to include Evan Ingram, but some people do. at that point, it's like I sort of forget that there is one more name out there that has a lot of upside, and that's Brock Bowers. But in this case, we'll just kind of wait on tight end. We've still got names that are going to be able to be plugged in. I'm kind of interested in Cole Kmet way down here. You could aim for one of the Packer guys and still probably get away with it. So I'm not really freaking out about anything going on there. We've got 3 running backs already, so this could probably make sense to be a wide receiver. And we're going to stash Keon Coleman on our bench here just in case he ends up being the go-to target for Josh Allen in Buffalo. I don't know how much I trust the health of Curtis Samuel, the productivity of Curtis Samuel. Obviously, the tight ends, Kincaid and Dalton Knox, are going to be utilized. But I think having rookie wide receivers on my bench is exactly the way that I would like to see things play out. But now I'm pretty robust at a lot of the positions that I need to be. We did see some tight ends fall off the board, but none of the ones I was really thinking about taking. So we're still in a great spot. And honestly, could probably stand to wait another pass through simply because everybody here but Team 3 has their tight end already. You're obviously going to be dealing with computers, so if they want to do something crazy, that could end up burning me. But I'm going to look for another upside name here. I think I prefer going with more wide receiver talent than running back talent. Chase Brown is the one that you'll see me try to draft every time down in this range. But also keep in mind we had said Blake Corum might be an interesting guy with one of our last picks in order to kind of stash away in case of a Kyron Williams injury. But I think we're going to take Jackson Smith and Jigba. I want to see what the new passing offense in Seattle looks like. I'm not super high on Geno Smith, but for the price there on JSN, I think it's a pretty good pick. Christian Watson, if I would buy into him having a fully healthy season, he's an interesting guy to draft for your bench because if he happens to start out strong and you don't trust his health, he's going to have trade value. So Christian Watson is also somebody I'm considering in that tier. I like Jameson Williams, as you've seen me draft him in previous videos, but I would almost rather see him drop another round because he's going in the 10th usually, and that's for non-Superflex leagues. So to see him go in the 10th round here, it's not really like the greatest price in the world. So I'll continue to take young wide receivers and hope for upside. The tight ends do end up going off the board, so that's one of those things you just have to realize is probably not going to happen in a real league. But with the computers here, that did end up taking place. And I am going to go ahead and just grab Luke Musgrave here because I think he could end up being the tight end for Green Bay, and I do want a piece of that Packer passing offense. And since I did not take Christian Watson, I'm fine with grabbing Musgrave and basically just saying we'll play waivers if we have to for tight end if Musgrave doesn't end up panning out. What that did cause us to do, though, is look a little bit past the running backs we were wanting, which is Chase Brown and Blake Corum. So I was a little too fast and loose with my decision to just go ahead and grab tight end. I think I got a little panicky because I didn't expect the computer to take backup tight ends like they did on that last pass through. So otherwise, if I had probably been a little more prepared, I would have said Chase Brown or Blake Corum would have been my pick. It would have been Chase Brown, and then you would have hoped for maybe Corum to continue falling because you're not going to overpay for a stash like that. But I think I could still end up taking one more running back, still end up maybe with another quarterback. Let's kind of see what the quarterbacks look like. I don't know that Bryce Young is going to drop all the way to this level in a real Superflex league, but I'd always like to have a third QB on my bench, especially when I waited longer than almost any other team to take my first one in this draft. We miss out on like an Xavier Legette as a result of it, but that's okay. I think Bryce Young actually with some more weapons around him and another year of maturation could end up being a nice option. Again, you could go the Russell Wilson and Justin Fields pairing with your last 2 picks. Drop the one that doesn't pan out for a hot waiver name because only one of them is going to be able to start at a time. So I really don't have an issue with any of these things that have happened. And then we'll take Jalen Wright with our last pick. I do believe if a Raheem Mostert or Achane injury happens, Jalen Wright's going to be wheels up. And I do happen to have Achane on my team. So I didn't end up handcuffing my Kyron Williams pick. I went with the Achane handcuff because it sort of fell to me with my last pick. So this is a general strategy that I tend to take. I think this is going to be a year where you're going to want to get one of these workhorse running backs, maybe multiple of them. And there's no easier place to do it than in Superflex when I can basically try to use arbitrage to my advantage, right? Why are people drafting Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson and Lamar Jackson in this range, Jalen Hurts in this range? Because they have rushing upside and passing upside. Jaden Daniels is coming cheaper than all of those names because he's not as much of a guarantee as those names. I'm not pretending that Jaden Daniels is the same, but that's where we get into arbitrage. You can try to anticipate and say, well, Jaden Daniels might be closer to Kyler Murray in terms of fantasy production than we think. Not saying he's going to be the same level of NFL quarterback, but maybe he's close to him for fantasy. And if that's the case, I did a very nice job of a value proposition by waiting until the 5th to get him, and then I was able to get Breece Hall and Kyron Williams together. I was able to take an upside wide receiver like Marvin Harrison. And look, if Tank Dell is not the dude for the Houston Texans and Marvin Harrison takes some time to get acclimated, I've still got other upside shots that I've taken. And if one of them hits, if Xavier Worthy is the guy, if Keon Coleman is the guy, I'm going to be able to plug one of those guys in for an underperformer in my lineup. But to have 3 running backs like Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, and Devon Achane, I don't know how anybody could look at this draft and say, I didn't do a pretty nice job setting up my team. Is there risk at quarterback? Yeah, for sure. But really what it boils down to for me is, especially in my assumption with doing this league, is that it's a standard 4-point per passing touchdown league. If it's a 6-point per passing touchdown, I'm going to be a lot more interested in guys like Stafford, Kirk Cousins, and I will have a name of Dak Prescott moved way up my board in 6-point for pass touchdown leagues, because I think that the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to be able to run in any touchdowns at all this year with that running back core. It's going to be all Dak. So I would then change my strategy. But because I'm assuming 4-point per pass touchdown, rush touchdowns are more valuable than pass touchdowns, so I always want to grab a rushing quarterback. And then with Aaron Rodgers, I think as long as he's on the field for the Jets, there's a floor there. And he's got weapons like Garrett Wilson to throw to. So I feel pretty good about that. And I do end up having a higher bet on the Jets than I wish because I've got their running back and their quarterback. But if Breece Hall ends up catching any touchdowns, that's an interesting kind of stack that you don't think is going to be very common. But I actually don't have an issue with it at all. And then just taking a Bryce Young toward the end of my draft, if he happens to be there that late, that's just fine. And I'll be more than happy to trade him away if he ends up panning out and my others are pretty good. Or maybe I'm just kind of over the Aaron Rodgers experience, but he's got a big name. And if Bryce Young's getting me 15 points per week in a quarterback 2 spot, maybe I'll go ahead and trade Aaron Rodgers. You never know. So am I a little bit less lean at the quarterback position? Yeah, I don't have the robust QB rooms of a Hurts Murray stack or an Allen Purdy stack or even a Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert stack. But I think my QB1, Jaden Daniels, has upside, and that's something that I'm always going to chase in these formats to try and get it on the cheap. Get the guy that comes next. And again, Jaden Daniels could be flaming out like Justin Fields 2 years from now. But this year, he's going to get every opportunity to succeed, and rushing is going to be part of his game no matter what. So I think we did pretty well with this draft. Let me know what your thoughts are. And if you'd rather see me do a draft where I do go heavy on the quarterbacks early, I can do that. I just would always rather try to zig where the rest of the league zags. And if people are drafting 6 quarterbacks in the first round and we see, 7 or 8 of them go off the board before my second pick, at that point, I'm just going to be pretty happy enough to take the other positions and try to stock up there. Let me know your thoughts on this and subscribe to this video and this channel to find more of our content throughout the rest of the draft season. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.